particular. "I need this area secured. New door, locks, guards. No one comes in here but me. Unless they outrank me, of course, and even then they need to log in and out. Finish up what you're doing without touching anything else and get out." The soldiers who were mopping up blood on hands and knees exchanged a look and said, "Yes, sir." Archer looked over at the computer displaying the black screen of death and wondered if it was truly wiped. If anybody alive could retrieve some data remnants not swept up in the harvest, it would be him. Chapter 1. Black Swan Field Training Manual, Section 1, Chapter 1, Number 1. The plural of vampire is vampire. When the initial rush of activity subsided, he had found himself all too often alone with his own thoughts, a condition that was tediously familiar since he had spent hundreds of years that way. Without the distraction of his friends' banter, since his proposed staff had left Edinburgh, he had begun to see his task not as just a job, but as a mission, one immersed in the duality of joy and gravity, though lately it seemed gravity was winning. He had never considered himself to be impatient, quite the contrary. Everything he had ever pursued in earnest, from painting to music to writing, had depended upon patience. But his awareness of the enormity of the burden he had accepted had grown over the past months, and he had turned to brooding about the time that was passing. Every day that nothing was accomplished was a day when more people had their humanity taken from them, another day when vampire remained imprisoned in bodies infected with the foulest disease imaginable, and also another day when people died. The project was moving painfully slowly. Everyone who had originally been assigned to work with Baka was gone, married, retired, whatever. Everyone except Heaven, who turned out to be anything but. If he was to be brutally honest with himself, he would have to admit that one of the main reasons for the slow progress was his distraction with his appointed assistant. The large workspace, intended for several people, held 2 people most of the time. He worked from early in the morning till late at night, challenging both the hours in the day and the fact that he was one excruciatingly short-handed task force leader. When Heaven was present, her moods ran the range of a shallow bell curve from disagreeable to surly to sullen. He admitted that he had provoked her on their first meeting, for reasons that were a mystery to him. Something about her had instantly put him on edge, made him feel anxious and inclined to strike out. Even though that feeling persisted, he had attempted to make amends so that they could work together amicably, but his attempts at accord had failed. Miserably so. She was prickly all the way to her luscious core, spurning every effort on his part to develop a rudimentary standard of civility, no matter how many times he tried. He not only had to work with a person who detested his very presence, but adding insult to injury, it seemed he couldn't shake an inexplicably strong attraction to her. He found himself staring at the curve of her cheek when her head was bowed over work, or the shine of her chestnut hair when she walked in front of a window, right through a bank of sunrays, or the way her lips pursed in silent protest and disdain whenever he gave her something to do. It was damned aggravating to be held captive, figuratively, by a woman who detested him. To make matters worse, he seemed to have lost interest in pursuing other women, which really wasn't like him at all. After being freed of the vampire virus, he found himself in a world where sex was king. Women dressed provocatively. Women were provocative, and they were free to share sex if it suited them to do so, without needing permission outside their own conscience. He had made the most of that window of sexual opportunity between the cure and the day Heaven walked into his war room. For over 5 months, she had behaved as if simple courtesy was more than she could manage. That meant that nice was a goal way too distant. Baka knew it wasn't an expression of her nature in general because he'd often watched her from across the dining hall laughing and interacting with other associates and employees. No, with others her manner was open and unguarded. 1,000 times a day his eyes sought her out, while he surreptitiously pretended to be doing something else. He found himself imagining having her lift her head and turn the sunshine of that smile his way, or even better, to angle her face up at him, with invitation on her features, while she pressed her beautifully packed curves against his body. The thought of that made him hard, painfully so. Again. He was staring at the clock on the wall as he did that time every day, waiting for the separation ritual to begin. At exactly 15 after 5, Heaven checked her...